Yeah, it's working. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل. السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم. ثانيا غفر الله لكم. أريد أكثر ثاني. welcome. السلام عليكم. welcome. ثالثا على حب الحسين بأعلى أصواتكم. thank you. أحسنت. just some volume. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واجعل لي لسان صدق في الآخرين واجعلني من ورثة جنة النعيم واغفر لأبي إنه كان من الضالين ولا تخزني يوم يبعثون يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم وأزلفت الجنة للمتقين وبرزت الجحيم للغاوين وقيل لهم أين ما كنتم تعبدون من دون الله هل ينصرونكم أو ينتصرون فكبكبوا فيها هم والغاوون وجنود إبليس أجمعون قالوا وهم فيها يختصمون تالله إن كنا لفي ضلال مبين إذ نسويكم برب العالمين وما أضلنا إلا المجرمون فما لنا من شافعين ولا صديق حميم فلو أن لنا كرة فنكون من المؤمنين إن في ذلك لآية وما كان أكثرهم مؤمنين وإن ربك لهو العزيز الرحيم كذبت قوم نوح المرسلين إذ قال لهم أخوهم نوح ألا تتقون إني لكم رسول أمين فاتقوا الله وأطيعون وما أسألكم عليه من أجر إن أجري إلا على رب العالمين فاتقوا الله وأطيعون قالوا أنؤمن لك واتبعك الأرذلون قال وما علمي بما كانوا يعملون إن حسابهم إلا على ربي لو تشعرون وما أنا بطارد المؤمنين إن أنا إلا نذير مبين قالوا لئن لم تنته يا نوح لتكونن من المرجومين قال رب إن قومي كذبون فافتح بيني وبينهم فتحا ونجني ومن معي من المؤمنين فأنجيناه ومن معه في الفلك المشحون ثم أغرقنا بعد الباقين إن في ذلك لآية وما كان أكثرهم مؤمنين وإن ربك لهو العزيز الرحيم كذبت عاد المرسلين إذ قال لهم أخوهم هود ألا تتقون إني لكم رسول أمين فاتقوا الله وأطيعون وما أسألكم عليه من أجر إن أجري إلا على رب العالمين أتبنون بكل ريع آية تعبثون وتتخذون مصانع لعلكم تخلدون وإذا بطشتم بطشتم جبارين فاتقوا الله وأطيعون واتقوا الذي أمدكم بما تعلمون أمدكم بأنعام وبنين وجنات وعيون إني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم عظيم قالوا سواء علينا أوعظت أم لم تكن من الواعظين إن هذا إلا خلق الأولين وما نحن بمعذبين فكذبوه فأهلكناهم إن في ذلك لآية وما كان أكثرهم مؤمنين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين. For all of your marhumin, for all mu'mineen and mu'minat, let us recite Surah Al-Mubarakah Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا والبراءة من أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين. اللهم أنطقني بالهدى وألهمني التقوى ووفقني للتي هي أزكى. اللهم وأخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم وافتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل يا رب على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Respected brothers, respected sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There are a number of rational laws that must be observed when embarking the journey in quest for the truth. In this lecture, inshallah, I will highlight 3 of these important rational laws. Each and every one of us is a seeker of the truth. We want to know what is true with respect to our faith, with respect to anything that we wish to establish or establish truth and validity in. In order to do that, there are certain and specific rational laws, in addition to the laws of logic and laws of correct reasoning, that we should keep and bear in mind. In this lecture, as I mentioned, 3 of these laws, inshallah, will be highlighted. And I would need to explain these laws, I would need your undivided attention, inshallah, after a loud salawat. The first of these laws says, any possible truth must be sought and searched via means that are proportional to it. Any possible truth must be sought via means that are proportional to it. I'll give you an analogy, an example, and from that analogy we will understand what this law means. If I wanted to capture an image, a normal image, a nearby image, all I need to do is use a camera, be it my phone camera, be it another camera. Any camera will do the job to capture an image that is within reasonable distance. But I cannot use that camera if I wanted to look for the crescent moon, for example, especially on the night of Eid when all of us are eager to find the crescent moon. And we know we have to see it with the naked eye, but the telescope is the means that we would use that helps us locate where that crescent moon is, or at least see it. Then we can remove the telescope and of course try to see it with the naked eye. We would not be using a camera for that purpose, as the means here in this subject is a telescope. And it cannot be a camera. And it cannot be a microscope. A microscope also would not do the job. Now on the other hand, if we wanted to locate or we wanted to detect very, very small objects such as germs that cannot be seen with the naked eye, we would need a microscope. A camera would not do the job. A telescope would not do the job. So you find that anything that we want to find has means that are proportional to it, means that are appropriate for it. If we use other means, we will not find that which we are looking for. And because we use the wrong means and we could not find that which we are looking for, it does not mean that what we are looking for does not exist. But what we have done actually is use the wrong means for the subject that we are aiming to achieve or aiming to detect or establish. Based on this, there are 3 major means for acquiring knowledge. 3 major means. And each of these means has a scope. And if we use one of these means in the wrong scope, or in a scope that is meant to be for another means or for another subject, then of course we would not find the truth that we are looking for. Inshallah, this is going to be more clear as we get into the examples. The 3 major means for acquiring knowledge are our senses, our intellect, and alaykum assalam, and divine revelation. I'll begin with the first one, alaykum assalam. Our senses. The 5 senses are one of the important means for seeking knowledge. But the scope of the 5 senses is this material and physical world that we are in. It is limited to that which can be sensed. Most importantly, that which can be seen, that which can be heard, that which can be touched. The 5 senses are an important means for detecting and finding knowledge, but again, it is limited to what? To the physical and material realm. The 5 senses cannot show us anything that is metaphysical or that is beyond the physical realm. If we wanted to find something that is not of the physical realm, there's no way that we can rely on our 5 senses. Rather, we would have to utilize a different means. The second is intellect, aql, the faculty of reason. And aql here, which we can refer to as a mind, the intellect, reason, all these are words to indicate aql, just like how in the Arabic language we have many words that indicate aql. We have lub, plural albab, we have hijr, we have nuha, we have many other names that indicate aql. Aql comprehends concepts in images, and aql makes judgments and makes deductions. Now, let me give you an example of how aql works. Aql relies on the senses, but also aql is equipped with a number of axioms, badihiyat, self-evident truths that aql uses to produce new information and new knowledge. If you see someone bring a cold water in a pot and place it on a stove, and you turn on that stove to a very high level of heat, in a few minutes you'll find that the water is boiling. All the senses are seeing is water placed on the stove and then it starts to boil. Anything beyond that, the senses do not tell you. Our eyesight does not tell us why the water began to boil. All it says to us is there is water, it is cold, then the water began to boil. Why? Our senses don't have that knowledge. Our senses transfer that image and that information to aql. And this is where aql resorts to the axioms or badihiyat or self-evident truths. And these self-evident truths, one of them would come out known as the law of causation, cause and effect, and it would tell us that for every effect there has to be a cause. And that the cause of this boiling is the heat. This heat, this fire, is the cause of the boiling of this water. This water boiled because it was placed on a high temperature heat. This is the role of aql. So aql is equipped with these axioms. When aql sees that there is a universe through the senses say we exist, we acknowledge that we exist. And we see many existence around us. We see creatures like us. We see animals. We see a sky. We see stars. We see the sun. We see the moon. We see trees. We see all kinds of things. All this information is detected via our senses and transferred to aql. Aql right away says there must be an origin for all that which you see. So aql here relies on senses to capture the images. But aql also relies on the equipped axioms or self-evident truths that are built within it to deduce information, to make judgment. Aql here, after comprehending through the senses that there are things that exist, aql right away says there must be an origin. There must be a cause. The third means of seeking knowledge or understanding is divine revelation. And divine revelation simply means the guidance and knowledge and information that is revealed to specific individuals from the creator of the universe. Now, divine revelation, also referred to in Arabic as wahi, cannot be used as a source of knowledge before it is verified. If we ask ourselves, where do we begin in quest for the truth? Do we begin with the senses? Do we begin with aql? Or do we begin with divine revelation? The answer is we would begin with aql, using the senses to establish divine revelation. We can't jump right into divine revelation to establish the truths that we are looking for. We can't come directly to the Holy Quran or to one of the books that Allah has revealed and say, well, the book says this, therefore this is the truth. The first thing that we have to do is establish the validity and authenticity of these divine revelations. And we do that first by establishing that there is a creator, that there is a God. And this is what aql helps us establish. Aql says that all this universe must have been created by a higher power. And aql would also tell us that all the creation that we see in creatures call or speak loudly that this creator is wise, this creator is intelligent. And we know that a wise and intelligent would not do things in vain. And therefore there must be a purpose. And that purpose must be delivered to us, must be taught to us so that we can live up to that purpose, which requires sending messengers, prophets. The second thing that must be established is that these prophets and messengers must be identified to us through means that have no obscurity or ambiguity. Meaning that anyone who comes and claims that they have received revelation from this higher power must show a miracle, a supernatural phenomena that cannot be defeated and cannot be challenged, so that we can believe that these people that are claiming to be holders of revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from God, are truthful in what they are claiming. In addition to that, we must establish that God, the wise, the just, does not support false claimants. You see, these are all truths that must be established via aql. Aql has to set all these truths and establish them before we can move on to divine revelation. So aql plays a significant role, intellect plays a significant role in establishing many of the truths that pave the way to us, or that pave the way for accepting divine revelation. So far we're talking about the first law. What is the first law? That any truth that we seek to establish must be sought through means that are proportional to it. We cannot say that I want to know whether Allah exists, whether Allah has sent prophets, whether there is Sharia, whether I can't establish that just by resorting directly to the Holy Quran. And I can't establish that by just resorting to senses. Senses do not have the capability of showing me God. Senses do not have the capability or capacity to establish any of these truths that we have mentioned. That is why the people who relied on the senses and scientific experiments, some of them have concluded that because we cannot test the reality or the existence of God through the means that we have, through experiments, therefore He does not exist. Which is a wrong start. The method that must be used here is the rational method, not the sensual or empirical or experiment method. Because the experiment method can only test that which is within the physical realm. And if God is beyond the physical realm, there's no way that our senses and our experiments can detect Him. Yes, the experiment and senses can capture images and send them as data to the intellect, to aql, and aql would make that call and say that all this intricate universe must be originated by an intelligent and a wise creator. This is the first law of ma'rifah, the rational law that we must keep in mind when seeking truth. It is to seek the desired knowledge and desired truth via means that are proportional to it. Now once we establish all this and we become Muslims and we become believers, sometimes we forget this law and we start to ask about truths and look for answers to these truths in the wrong method or in the wrong means. For example, we may ask, how can we prove scientifically that a specific divine ruling is in the best interest of humankind? Scientific experiment cannot give us that answer. And this is where sometimes we go wrong. Well, I don't understand the logic, for example, behind a specific ruling. Well, me not understanding the logic behind that ruling, I can't see the actual material and physical fruit and benefit of that ruling, doesn't mean that there is no benefit to that ruling, but the benefit to that ruling cannot be detected and known via the senses. There's another realm that I have to resort to, and that would be the revelation. The second law: just as claiming that something exists requires proof, claiming that something does not exist also requires proof. A lot of times you hear people say, there is no proof that this is true, therefore it's not true. No, therefore you don't have proof of its validity and truth. You can't say therefore, alaykum salam, you can't say therefore it's not true. I cannot find something that I'm looking for, therefore it's not here and it does not exist. No, no, no. I cannot find it. I still don't have proof that it does not exist. That is why when someone makes a claim such as, we couldn't find Allah, we couldn't find God, therefore He does not exist, we would say to them, when you say He does not exist, that claim requires proof. The most you can say is, I could not find Allah. But you can't say that He does not exist, because when you say He does not exist, you're making a statement, and the statement requires evidence. And anything this applies to. I cannot find a logical explanation to a specific phenomena, therefore there is no logical explanation. No, no. There's possibly a logical explanation. I just could not find it. For me to deny that there is a logical explanation behind a specific phenomena, I have to provide proof. That is why when somebody argues with you in debates and says to you, for instance, that this thing is invalid or this thing is not true, ask them, what is the proof that it's not true? If they tell you, because I can't find proof that it's true, therefore it's not true, tell them this is a fallacy. There's no way we can accept that. The most you can say is, I don't know. Not that I know that it doesn't exist. Lack of evidence or absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, as they say. Me not knowing that something is true or something exists doesn't mean that that thing is not true or it does not exist. We have to bear and keep this very important rational law in mind when we are in quest for the truth. Law number 3, and we need to pay more attention to this law as it is very relevant to many things that we deal with. Certainty cannot be opposed by assumption. Certainty cannot be opposed by assumption. What does that mean? Well, if I have established that God exists and that God is just and that God is wise and that God does not do things in vain, and I have reached certainty in this truth, I cannot allow any other assumption or conjecture or dhann to stand in the way of that truth or that certainty and override it. What do I mean? If I encounter something that is unclear about Islam, something that is unclear about a ruling in Islam, I read a verse and it sounded in a way that just doesn't make sense to me. Why did Allah say this? Why did Allah legislate this? This just doesn't fit, doesn't rest in my mind. I can't seem to comprehend it. The question is, the level of knowledge that you have arrived at from this question or from this encounter, is it certainty or you're still in the assumption mode? Are you saying, I am certain this thing is absolutely wrong, and wal'ayadhu billah, this law makes no sense? You're saying, no, no, I just find it unclear. It just doesn't make sense to me. Which means I'm still at the mode of dhann, conjecture, the mode of assumption. I'm still not at the level of certainty that this is absolutely invalid or a law or a ruling that doesn't make sense. I'm just still perplexed by it. I cannot allow this perplexed mode to cancel and dismiss my certainty. Certainty cannot be overridden by doubt or by speculation or by assumptions and conjectures. Certainty stands firm and cannot be overridden unless by another certainty that is stronger than it. We even have that in our practical laws. It's a general principle known as the principle of istishab, principle of continuation or principle of certainty, which means that if a person is certain that they have observed something or have done something, and now they are in doubt whether they haven't done that thing or whether they have continued to observe what they have observed first, they would assume or they would err on the default that they have continued to do that. I'll give you an example. Somebody performs wudu before they come to the center, and they know they have performed wudu, they have certainty. But now they are in doubt whether this wudu is invalid. Have they invalidated this wudu or not? Fuqaha say this doubt cannot annul the previous certainty. You still would continue to have that certainty that you began with. Somebody you knew, always knew to be adil, to be just, to be pious, and whenever you see them, you pray behind them. But for some reason, you lost touch, and it's been 2 years. 2 years later, you met in the city of Karbala or in the city of Mashhad, and they stood to pray and they led jama'ah. Can you pray behind them? Your previous certainty says they were just. Now you're in doubt and you don't know. You can't let this doubt dismiss your previous certainty. Even in our normal dealings with others, someone you know to be very righteous, someone you know to be very pious, someone you know who would never steal. Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah. Alaykum salam. He would never steal, he would never do anything like that. And one day you see them at night wearing all black clothes, wearing a mask, and they go into their neighbor's backyard and they take something and run. Are you positive? Are you certain that they have stolen that which they took from the backyard of their neighbor? It's possible, but your certainty that they are righteous does not allow you to believe and accept that they stole something. You would start to say to yourself, perhaps this is something that was stolen from them by their neighbor and they went to gain it back. You can't let that assumption annul your certainty about that person. Now let's dive deeper here and come to the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran has so many verses that appear to indicate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a shape, has a physical form. What we conclude from these verses, or what we understand from these verses, is not at the level of certainty and yaqeen. When I say, for example, this verse appears to be indicating that God has a physical form or physical shape, is this appearance or dhuhur of that ayah, does that dhuhur amount to certainty, or the most it amounts to is conjecture, dhann? If you say there's another possible explanation of the verse, that means you haven't reached a certain understanding of the verse. But then you have a certainty in the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have a physical shape and that He is beyond all confinements and limitations. This certainty cannot be overridden by this assumption and incomplete understanding of these verses. So at that point, what do? Do you dismiss your certainty for the sake of assumption, or do you manipulate your assumption so that it can be in line with your certainty? Similarly, the verses that talk about the prophets and how certain prophets made certain mistakes. Again, verses appear to attribute mistakes to prophets. That's not the definite meaning of the verse. It's a possible meaning of the verse. Alaykum as-salam. Possible meaning of the verse that the prophets have made, alaykum as-salam, a mistake. But then you have certainty that has been already established that prophets are what? Infallible. So how can you dismiss that certainty? By assumptions. Therefore, these assumptions must be manipulated to be in line with your certainty. To summarize, there are 3 laws that we should keep in mind when we are in quest for truth. Number 1, the means that we use to seek truth must be proportional to that truth. Number two, not having evidence about something does not mean that that something is invalid. And in order to prove that this thing is invalid or not true, we need evidence to demonstrate that or substantiate that. And number three, certainty cannot be opposed by assumption. Inshallah, I will conclude here and leave the rest of the time for your questions, inshallah, before we move on to Salah. If you have any questions, please proceed. Yes, doctor, brother, go ahead.
Regarding the second rule, how can you prove the non-existence of something?
How can you prove the non-existence of something?
For example, if someone tells me that there is no butterfly in this room.
Correct. Ahsant.
And then I say, okay, how about behind the member?
Mm.
And then if it's not there, I say, how about inside that fan, for example?
So here, ahsant, and this is where we say they have to provide full proof that it doesn't exist before we accept it. And one way they would do that, first of all, butterfly, is it something that can be sensed? We have to first establish, is it a sensible thing? Can it be sensed? If it can't be sensed, for example, if you could say to them, prove to me there's no jinn in this room. Well, jinn can't be sensed, so there's no means that we have to prove their existence or their non-existence. But when you say butterfly, it makes it easy, because this is something that can be sensed. So here they would have to go around the entire space that we are in and prove to you via their device, via their camera. They would show you every single place that it's not there. Then they would say, see, we've shown you every single spot and you couldn't see it. Therefore, what's the conclusion? It's not there. They would have to go through all the space and use all their tools to establish that there is no butterfly in the room. Then you would accept their claim. Otherwise, their claim would remain just a claim, and we cannot rely on it. Just by them saying, we don't see the butterfly, therefore it doesn't exist. They would have to actually go to every possible place that the butterfly could be in, and they would have to detect that to make sure that there is nothing in it and show you that they haven't found anything in it. Ahsantum. Any other questions? Sisters, if you have questions, the microphone is available. Okay, what time is Salah? 34, so 5 minutes, okay. So, yes, Haidar, you have a question? Go ahead.
Can you repeat it?
The question?
Yeah, for the second one.
The second one. Anything that someone claims does not exist or claims as not true, they must provide proof. You can't say just because I don't know something is true, therefore it's not true. I don't know that something exists, therefore it doesn't exist. No. For you to say that it doesn't exist or it's not true, you must provide evidence. You know, a lot of times, alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah, a lot of times you find people saying, oh, I don't think this is part of Islam. Why don't you think this is part of Islam? Islam is against that. Well, how do you know Islam is against that? I assume Islam is against that just because it doesn't fit in with my understanding. Just because it doesn't fit in with your understanding, it doesn't mean that Islam is against it. And therefore, you can't say Islam is surely against it. You have to provide proof. How do you provide proof that Islam is against it? You bring me a verse that is clear or a hadith that is authentic and clear that says Islam is against this. Otherwise, I can't accept the claim that, oh, Islam is against this.
What is the example
Of this right now, Islam is against something? If I said, for example, if I said Islam is against using social media because social media is bad and I don't like it. What is the proof? Do we have a verse? Do we have a general principle? Do we have a hadith that tells us that this is something that is forbidden in Islam? No. But what we have is that there is correct way of using media in general and an incorrect way. But to say that it is absolutely rejected by Islam, that is a claim that cannot be proven. Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah. Alaykum as-salam. Yes, Muhammad, go ahead. Can you repeat that? The Kaaba, yes, there are people that have entered the Kaaba, and first and foremost we know that Lady Fatima, daughter of Asad, entered the Kaaba and she delivered her baby Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And he was the only child born inside the holy Kaaba. Any other questions before we conclude? أحسنتم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.